The Pop-Tart Bowl is big if you're a Hurricanes fan, arguably even bigger if you are a Cyclone, and huge if you're a fan of Pop-Tarts in general. But this game has major implications. We'll break it down today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you guys that make this your first listen or watch every day. And to those of you who are here every day, you already know you guys are the real ones, make the world go round. Couldn't do it without you. That being said, if you are listening or watching wherever you get your daily dose of Cyclones, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is in fact a Cyclone state, because we the people need to speak quite loud, that's for sure. Before we get into the episode, though, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, let's take a look at the slate. What do we got? If you are listening, if you're watching, right over here, I've got it up for you. First, we're going to break down how the Pop-Tart Bowl has major implications, not just for the Cyclones or for the Hurricanes. And then we're going full football today. So I'm going to talk a little bit Iowa State. What do we need to do to win this game? What do the Cyclones need to do to be ceremoniously eating a mascot? Kind of a weird situation there, but hey, it is what it is. And then finally, I'll take a look at some of the Miami key players. Obviously, this team very good, but I'm going to pick a few out. Which ones could have the biggest impact on the game? That being said, let's just go ahead and dive right on into it. Big picture here. How does this affect more football than just the Cyclones or the Hurricanes camp? Yes, Pop-Tart lovers out there are going to look at this game and immediately be huge fans of the trophy, as I am myself. Speaking of, probably should get an upgrade on my toaster. That being said, I personally think this game is enormous because of the implications this will have in the college football playoff going forward. We have yet to talk about the actual playoff picture on this show simply because Iowa State did not make that picture. And after this last weekend, when things kind of went down the way they did, it's been absolutely huge. That's all anyone wants to talk about right now. And I honestly don't blame them. I kind of want to talk about it myself. So let's talk about it. Every home team in the first round of this first 12-team playoff won. Okay. All of the lower seeds lost. Now, some are going to tell you different reasons than others. Okay. There's the argument right now that it's the committee picked teams that were the most deserving and not the best couple teams, not obviously the best four because we're talking about 12 here. But there's also the argument out there that it's the weather, right? We had some of the it was the first home games in the college football playoff, but certainly some of the coldest games that have major stakes, at hand here. So playing in South Bend, in a state college or a Columbus, Ohio, these games were certainly colder than they are normally. So that may have played a role as well. That all aside, not really what we're talking about today. It is certainly interesting. Don't get me wrong. And I'd love to break it down even further. But what I'm interested in is the teams that got in. It's not about the weather for me. People were talking about, is it the most deserving teams to get in? Is it the best teams? Well, how are we evaluating this? One team of major conversation was obviously Indiana. 11 wins. Absolutely unbelievable. I don't think anybody saw this coming. They get in, and yes, they lost by 10 at the end of the game. I'm not here to break down that game. It wasn't that close. I'm going to be completely honest. It was pretty ugly for most of this game, and now everyone's saying, oh, Indiana didn't deserve to be in. When you look at the field as a whole, SMU was the only non-Big 12 or SEC at-large bid. They came from the ACC. You know who else plays in the ACC? Miami. I know I just beat around this enormous bush to get to this point, but what I'm saying here is if Iowa State can win this game handedly against Miami, I think the Big 12 will gain a significant amount of credibility moving forward. Okay. The Big 12 has been known to beat itself up from within, cause a lot of chaos, and not do too much after that, right? We don't have that many champions of, the entire league, national champions of college football. Oklahoma, Texas in their time with us was certainly, it helped quite a bit. But that being said, I think if Miami loses to the Cyclones in a handed fashion, right? Like it's not like a last second field goal from Kyle Conradi. Okay. It's not like a go ahead touchdown with 3, 4, 5 minutes left in this game. If Iowa State is able to tie this game up, put a bow on it, and put it under your Christmas tree with, let's say, 13 minutes left in the third quarter, right? Kind of how the Big 12 championship game felt. I think that is a very big turning head moment for this committee to be like, hey, maybe these Big 12 teams that do beat up on each other a little bit and don't have the best records of all time, maybe they're actually pretty good. Okay, maybe an Iowa State or a BYU or a Colorado could have snuck in this year. Maybe those teams, yeah, their records might not exactly be the best, but they are very good at playing the game that we call football. That pigskin, that little oblong shaped piece of leather that we toss around. Yeah, that game we play with that ball. Those Big 12 teams are pretty good at it. Okay, that's why I think this game is bigger for the game as a whole, and I think that's where we need to, as Cyclone fans, maybe look towards, Colorado, BYU, Utah, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, maybe even like a Kansas, and be like, look at their fans, be like, hey, you guys should root for us here because this could have major implications. If your team is good next year, but they're not like really, really good, if we win this game, I think every Big 12 team moving forward will have a better chance to sneak into the playoff. I'm not going to talk on does the playoff get expanded again to 14 teams? Does it move? Does it whatever? I'm going to act under the assumption that it will be a 12-team playoff next year and that it will be around the exact same selection style that we saw this year. And there are a ton of questions around that. A team like Indiana, who'd they play? I think they had like 109. It was 100 and somethingth strength of schedule. I want to say 19th, but that feels like it was too low. Regardless, people are like, hey, if you can just play the worst teams and get into the playoff, let's do that. I don't really agree with that, to be completely honest. But I would say I don't think you can get around that in the Big 12. I think almost 80% of teams in the Big 12 are very solid. And also on top of that, the Big 12 to me feels a little bit more like the NFL at times, in which it's any given Saturday. You can see a Kansas come in at the end of the season who doesn't even make a bowl game and just absolutely rip up the playoff picture and the Big 12 championship, kind of road, if you will. And all of a sudden now we're looking at Iowa State, ASU in the Big 12 championship instead of a BYU Colorado that we were expecting a few weeks prior. And Kansas was on nobody's board. Kansas did not make any noise hardly all year. And then they come in for 3-4 weeks and they just rip up all the tiles in the yellow brick road and then go home. They don't go to a bowl game. They literally go home. So, yes, I think the Big 12 could gain some major credibility from this game. And yes, it's only one game. And I think most people will have forgotten about it by next year. As unfortunate as it is, everybody's dialed in on the 12-team playoff. And Arizona State, they'll have a big role in that as well. If they get blown out in their first game, against Texas, it's not going to look great. It's simply not going to look great. But every team's kind of got to chip in and do their part here. And I think Iowa State has a very real case here, considering how good Miami was starting 9-0. Dropped 2 of their last 3. But overall, this team was turning a lot of heads. Many people had them as at some point during the season as their national champion. And whether or not I agree with it is a whole different battle. But to be honest, it will be a long road for Iowa State. This is going to be a tough game. I've talked about it before. I've gotten some flack on here. But I took a look into some of the numbers. I looked at some of the tape. This is going to be tough. So Iowa State, keys to victory absolutely have to be met. We'll get into those right after this. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay, so Iowa State is playing Miami. I don't know if you heard of this. There's a game called the Pop-Tart Bowl. Iowa State will be playing Miami in the Pop-Tart Bowl. Pop-Tarts are involved. Yes. I'm a fan of Pop-Tarts. I hope you're a fan of the show here, Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's dive into it. What does Iowa State need to do to beat the Hurricanes? Okay, I'm looking at right now, collegefootballinsiders.com. Shout out to these guys. Have all the stats. And current point projection, Iowa State coming away with about 28. Miami coming away with about 32. What do these numbers mean? They're kind of nothing. In my opinion, this website is very credible, very solid through and through. But overall, these are just numbers that have not been played out. Okay. Believe it or not, the guys have to go out on the field, step it out onto the grass in between the white lines, duke it out on the hash marks, and find out for once and for all who is the better team, who plays football better. So obviously these numbers, come with a grain of salt. But either way, Iowa State is not favored to win this game. Pretty clear. And I've had a lot of people tell me you're actually a little bit out of your mind for picking Iowa State to win pretty handedly here. And I'm delusional. Okay. I'm a Cyclones fan. I mean, I am. I bleed Cardinal and gold every day of the week, twice on Saturdays. So, yes, that is completely true. But I'm looking at these statistics here, and I'm going to be completely honest. Miami is so good at football. Sorta. Feels like I have to throw that caveat in here because I've looked at their schedule too, though, and I just don't know if this is a situation in which we're looking at like a team that played a bunch of nobodies, so their stats are going to look a lot better because it's like, who did you actually play? If I were to go out and run track against D1 athletes, I'd probably have pretty bad stats. Placement wise, obviously, if you're running track is a bad example because times are times. But if I'm running track against 7th graders, I'm probably going to beat most of them. At least most of them. So, I mean, if you look at that, like, hey, first in 17 straight meets, that's pretty good, right? Well, that's because you were racing like 14-year-olds. So, you're probably going to win a lot of those races. That being said, I mean, looking just at these numbers, there's no number on here in which Miami ranks lower than 23rd in the nation outside of points per Eckel. And then early downs EPA, but just as a team, their worst statistic is in the defensive success rate against the drop back pass. And that is where I think Iowa State has to capitalize. Okay. I absolutely think that this game will be won or lost based on whether or not Rocco is able to get the ball to Higgins and Knoll. And can we turn that up? How much what's the percentage of throws to runs? What is the play design? All of those things are going to go into how this game plays out, obviously. But I think we need to capitalize on that drop back pass defense success rate that it appears Miami kind of struggles with. And then, believe it or not, guess what, guys? My second point of emphasis is going to be on the Iowa State run defense. We've heard that quite a few times this year. In the Big 12 Championship, Cam Scadaboo certainly learned his name. Certainly learned his name. We talked about that on Twitter a little bit, at Nick Marv right down here, if you want to go check it out. Certainly learned his name, and he should probably have won the Heisman. Either way, I think Iowa State is going to have a bit of a field day here. Well, field day is actually a good thing. So a bit of a rough day. I'm looking at their top, 5 rushers. It's Martinez at 823, Fletcher Jr. with 545, and Lyle with 366. All pretty good numbers. Then you go down to 200 and 183. So they really have a 5-headed monster, if you will, back there. And that's kind of what scares me. Even looking at touchdown numbers, Lyle ripped off a 91-yarder this year. So these guys, Damian Martinez, though, is the leader. And if Iowa State can't slow that down, we're going to be completely outmanned, because we'll get into key players in just a few minutes here. But there are some very, very good offensive players for Miami. Number one scoring and total offense for the year in college football. Like, yeah, this team's pretty good. Okay. We got a bit of a tall task here in this game. I'm not going to lie. So, stopping that run is going to be absolutely enormous. And then I hate that I have to say this. Third point here, it's almost like an honorable mention. Absolutely have to double down. Half two. I don't know how you double down on that, but regardless, have to take care of the football. I mean, coming out of halftime of the Big 12 championship game, there's that portion of me that's like, Iowa State can be down by 60 points and we still have a chance if there's not zeros on the clock. Don't get me wrong. So I don't know how much of that is coming into play here. But coming out of halftime, I thought, hey, the Cyclones, we have a real chance. There's a whole half of football left. It's that mentality of, if you scored 100 in the first half, we can score 100 in the second half. It's the same amount of time. So I am completely on board with the Cyclones. Then we throw, I think it was a fumble pick. I think it was what it was. I know it was 3 straight turnovers coming out of that half, and it was just over extremely quickly. It was so hard to watch. I got my heart actually ripped out of my chest in Jerry World at AT&T Stadium, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that feeling. I hope I don't have to witness it again here in the Pop-Tart Bowl with sugary breakfast snacks on the line, because I think if this team can avoid the turnovers, we're in a very good spot. But if we start handing the ball off to a, absolutely unbelievable offense, we're going to have problems. Like, we actually are just going to have a bit of an issue here. Net points per drive, 6th in the entire country for Miami at 1.74 points per drive. To put some context into that, Iowa State ranking 43rd comes in at 0.62 points per drive. So over a whole point more than Iowa State is what Miami's scoring per drive. I think it might even be more. I'm looking at offense here, 3.422 points per drive, and Iowa State at 2.1, so 1.3 points more on offense per drive. Not exactly sure how that evens out. Need to get more familiar with these statistics, yes. But the point is, if we're giving the ball off to a team that can score very, very effectively on offense, that's not good. It's just not good. We can't do that. We absolutely can't do that. Therefore, that feels like just a given to me. That final point that I'm going to make is third downs, and I think it goes both ways. I think Iowa State needs to not end drives on third down, and they need to get Miami off the field. We need to have the ball as much as possible in this game. Keep the ball out of their offense's hands. If you can't tell by this point, I am not as scared of their defense as I am of their scoring ability. Okay, Miami, very good at the offense, at scoring points. And so that is where my main concern lies here. And Iowa State could be, obviously, I think it was third best passing defense in the country at one point. I think 196 yards per game is what they were allowing before the Big 12 championship. And so, yes, that game did kind of alter my perception of how that goes down, because I didn't think they'd let ASU throw all over us. And really quickly here, receiving wise for Miami, the thing that scares me is how deep they are. You go 1,100, 7, 6, 5, 5, 200 yards receiving for the first 6 guys. I think that's what that is. And then the touchdown numbers also reflect that, about that same curve, almost to the T. Kind of crazy there. So, that depth is concerning slightly, but also this team very, very good defensively against the pass, especially. And so that's not where my main concern lies. No. It is in our ability to, I guess, capitalize on our movements. The run defense is going to be big. Yes, I talked about their offense being so good, but I do wonder if our defense can hold. But I don't want to give them any more chances than they should have. I would like to keep that to a minimum. That is for sure. But that offense that I've talked so much about for Miami is headed by one of the best quarterbacks in the entire nation. Will be drafted within probably the first 10. Will he be on this key players for Miami moving forward? I don't know. You'll have to stick around right after this to find out. Gametime is today's sponsor, brought to you today by Gametime. Iowa State playing multiple different sports right now. If you're going to go take a look at them play, you got to get your tickets with Gametime. A couple different things here that Gametime does that absolutely turn my head from right to left or left to right, if you will, whichever side the game is going down on. First of all, the all-in pricing, unreal. I love that I don't have to do math in my head, pull out a calculator, find out how much am I going to be paying for these tickets. It shows the total up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout. That is big time. I love that. The other thing that I am a huge fan of is the ability to see the seat from, the view from the seat in the app. I don't have to look at some grid that I don't really know what's going on. Pick a seat that seems like it's probably close for good value and then hope that it's good when I get there. No, I can just pull up, click on the seat, show the view, and I'm like, okay, I don't really like this view. I think I want to maybe go from this side or from that angle. I absolutely love those features. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. So we've talked now thus far about the implications and the, I guess, the importance of this game, talking about the Pop-Tart Bowl. And then I was like, hey, well, if we're going to do that, we might as well talk about, what does Iowa State need to do to win this game? Because there's only two teams in the game. One of them has to win. We cover the Cyclones. This is, I feel like a no-brainer. What should we do to win this game? The other side of that ball is Miami. And we are going to talk now here at Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, about Miami and what does this team do well? Who do they flow through? Who are their key guys that, in theory, will bring home the game for them? Or allow them to snack on a mascot, which is kind of crazy. If you're not saying Cam Ward at 1, you're probably looking at the wrong roster. I will say I'm not really going to include him here, but I will talk just a little bit about the number one dude. He's unbelievable. 4,123 passing yards this year. I mean, how could you ignore it? He's unbelievable. Ranked 4th in Heisman voting this year. And just kind of looking at this from a different perspective here, Cam Ward is going to be a major problem for Iowa State because of his ability to extend plays. Iowa State's pass rush, wow, I sound like Chris Collinsworth. Pass rush hasn't been what I would call A+ this season. So we are going to need a lot of coverage sacks, actually, now that I say that, I almost kind of want to put somebody in a spy and get a coverage tackle, force Cam to scramble a little bit, and we get him for a short gain with that spy, or potentially, maybe target him into the backfield. I don't know if that's possible. But either way, Cam Ward has the absolute green light, the open ability to rip us apart, which is kind of my biggest concern, simply because of the lack of defensive line pressure that has been shown this year, and his ability to move around in the pocket and extend plays. He has, he's 4th in the Heisman voting for a reason. He'll probably go top 10. I would even maybe go top 5. But that being said, let's not get too crazy and talk about Cam Ward for 25 minutes here. This team is not just one guy. Who's he throw to? Well, one of my favorite last names, to be completely honest. None other than Xavier Restrepo. Absolute dog. Came away with 1,127 yards this year. For context, Iowa State, obviously, we had two 1,000-plus yard receivers. Jaden Higgins had 1,183. So just edged him out by about, what would that be, 56 yards? So that's like one big catch. And then, when you look at the rest of the receiving core, as I mentioned before, it's 11, 7, 6, 5, 5, 200 apiece, respectively. Iowa State, this is not exactly what we're talking about right now, but we go 11, 10, 2, then 179. So a much steeper drop off there, something you should probably pay attention to. But yes, Xavier Restrepo going to be big, and I'll be curious to see how Iowa State locks down their number one guy, and then what does that do for position, wide receiver 2 through 6? How do they spread that out? How does that get played? But obviously stopping, the number one guy, probably a smart play. We don't want to stop 5 other guys and let Restrepo run all over us. Defensively, they've got 2 standout players. I'm gonna nail this one because I've got some comments about the names. I hear you guys for sure. Francisco Mauigoa, linebacker, 6'3", 230 pounds. The American Samoa has just 2 sacks this season after compiling 11 in 22 and 23, but he is the leading tackler for this team. He's got 88 tackles on the year. Absolute baller. Just a true gamer. And then Michelle Powell, safety for Miami, yet another transfer portal player. 6'1", 210. He's a senior. This dude, 5 interceptions. That's pretty good. And as I said, 22 solo tackles, passes defended 5 interceptions. So 10 of the passes that went his way went severely in Miami's favor. As I said, avoiding the turnovers is going to be big. So obviously, maybe we try not to throw it into Powell's hands because he's good at catching interceptions. So is that maybe something we look at? I don't know. And then finally here, we touched on it just a little bit. Damian Martinez, leading rusher for this team, but we've kind of broken down. This team is deep. This team is very deep. 8, 5, 3, 2 for their top 4 running backs or top 4 rushing yard receivers there, essentially. And some of these guys, Lyle averaging 8.1 yards per carry. So, there's a lot of really good guys on this team. And we've got a couple more days to talk about it. But the biggest thing I pulled, when I dove into some of these stats here and looked at this tape is that, yes, this team is extremely good with their upfront talent, but this team is also quite deep, quite deep. Key players wise, this team seems to just have absolutely no shortage. And then, our key to victory, in my opinion, Iowa State simply absolutely have to make the most of our opportunities is how I'm going to put it. Need to stop the run, need to get secondary, essentially sacks, because Cam Ward is going to be able to extend that play. And third down, avoiding turnovers, pretty standard takes there. But this team is very good. Iowa State is going to have a pretty slim margin of error. And then, as we said, to start this whole thing off, this game is huge. It is. Obviously, ASU in the college football playoff is going to make a little bit more noise because they are on the bigger stage. But the Pop-Tart Bowl is nothing to scoff at. People will watch this game, if nothing else, but for the trophy ceremony at the end, to watch the toaster go and toast the winners Pop-Tarts. Which Pop-Tarts will they pick? But also, what does this mean moving forward? Does the Big 12 gain respect from this game? I absolutely think so. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for being here with me on Christmas Eve. If you like the backdrop, I came home for Christmas Eve, so let me know. Pretty fancy little backdrop. No Iowa State gear, but still, I thought it was pretty nice. Let me know what you think. Either on Twitter at Nick Marv or in the comment section down below. I read them all. So, that being said, until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.